Hello, this is Debbie McAllister, and this is Light Up Your Worth. I'm so excited to introduce you to my friend, Joli Knott. Jolly is a holistic astrologer, Reiki Master, and the founder of Bodhi Mindful. I think I messed that up, but her beliefs on healing are grounded in the power of heart center presence and connection. Isn't that beautiful? Using a variety of techniques, incorporating symbolism, stories, astrology, energy work, and more, Jolly seeks to provide a nurturing space for those women willing to go deep into furthering their journey of self understanding, self development, and growth. Healing is about moving from fixie to flow and learning to become one's own medicine. When we heal from within, we begin to heal all that is around us, to making the world a better place for everyone. Welcome, my friend.
Hi, Debbie. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I am so excited. We were chatting like I usually do before, because I obviously do a podcast because I like to talk to and listen and learn and share. And we
That
were
makes
we
two of
were
us.
we were we were talking. I'm like, oh my goodness, I probably got to start recording this episode because I'm chatting so much. But one of the first things I wanted to kind of dig into is understanding what is a holistic astrologer.
Well, thank you for starting us off on a great question. So you know how Instagram limits your bio, and I was really struggling to get across what it is that I do. And originally, I was referring to myself as a holistic therapist, but when astrology came into the mix, I just thought, well, let's replace therapist with astrologer. So I primarily work using astrology and Reiki, but I also weave in medical Qigong, working with traditional Chinese medicine, and aromatherapy and massage. So there's a variety of tools that I have access to. And whether you're coming to see me for an astrology session, a Reiki session, or I offer an Astro Reiki package, so you can have them both. I'm pulling in all these different models of healing that are ultimately holistic. And so that's where holistic astrologer comes from. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it does to me, because I really have never seen somebody, I've had met some amazing people. And I know that a lot of us pull in a lot of things in our toolbox for how we go about healing, whether, different types of modalities or body work, and like how you use aromatherapy and how powerful that can be in itself. But hadn't actually come across anybody using the Reiki with astrology. And then adding in the Chinese medicine, like that's just really a really powerful way to be able to combine all of those different strengths of each of the, the healing modalities. So thank you for that clarification. It really is powerful when I think of like having heart-centered presence and connection with people. I think we could probably just keep talking all day long, but about how important connecting into our own heart is, and having those connections with people, and how that really connects with us healing our own stories, our own things that we've either had those experiences or that space. And so I'd really like to understand how this is all, like, how did you start pulling this all together? Like where did you start with, this pathway, this journey that you've taken to be able to help others and help women really connect and go through this journey for themselves?
So, it's interesting because ultimately, a lot of the work we end up doing comes out of the work that started when we were trying to help ourselves. And I grew up in a family where my father was a doctor. He's retired now. But, this idea of helping people and caring for people was always really important. It was front and center of, how my family thrived and survived, if you will. And so I, at one point did look into going into medicine, but just decided it wasn't for me, and went on to have a very kind of varied career. I went kind of the gamut from marketing to, I was working in the financial markets as a broker. So it was quite interesting. I was very lucky to kind of wear a lot of different hats. But along the way, I became increasingly aware that something was missing, something wasn't quite right. And it really came to a head when I was trying to start a family with my husband. And I was in my late 30s. I didn't think it was going to be an issue until it was. And this is when I started to learn Reiki as a tool of self-compassion. And then along the way, I ended up adding in the medical Qigong. And there's so many different schools of medical Qigong, but essentially the one that I learned, this is when I was still living in Japan, it's akin to energetic acupuncture. That's probably the easiest way to describe it. And this was combined with aromatherapy. So that's something my teacher had already done. And then astrology has always been of interest to me. I started really diving deep around 2013. And then in 2018, I started really deep diving into the nervous system and trying to understand how we are on the physical plane. So for me, my work is really based on how we can look at ourselves, not just from the physical plane, but also the mental plane, the emotional plane, and the energetic plane. And, there's so many paths to healing, but whatever path you take, it's my belief that healing is to make whole, and you're not going to achieve that unless you are looking at those four levels: the mental, the emotional, the physical, and the energetic. If you're only tackling 2 out of the 4, for example, of course you'll see some improvement, but it might not be lasting. So that's the way I see it.
Oh,
I hope that answers the question.
Yes, yeah, it does. In fact, when you were talking through it, I was like, oh, I need to write all those down. But really, I really can follow your pathway of understanding how we start out by areas that are part of our own front and center with our own lives. And I've noticed that in myself, as well as multiple healing modality folks that I've met, all the amazing women that I've met, and men, and the coaches, and just I think everybody I've had on the podcast has really started from that point of where they intersected with something that was coming up in life. What I really love in that explanation too was that it's all four. And we can go do a lot of work. Like we might do a deep dive into the energy work, into some of the other areas. And I've recently seen this happen. I've spent a lot of time in a lot of the areas, but not as much on my physical. And boy, have I been given the opportunity this last couple of years to really focus on connecting that last part with the physical. And
yes,
oh my gosh, it's been life-changing.
And it's interesting because when you think about it, I think that this is something that's starting to bubble up to the surface, if you will. But, you know, modern society is all about go, go, go. It's very linear in terms of its view of time and in terms of its view on productivity. You know, we're just meant to be constantly producing and consuming. So we're not taught a lot of these principles of self-care and self-understanding. However, obviously, and certainly after the last 2 years of COVID, I think there's been a huge shift in the world in terms of, you know, where we're going from here. So,
yeah, the being, it's, oh, the being. And then when, as I don't know about you, but, and then I'd like to hear back, is that learning to be, you start to practice being, and then those around you may not practice being. So the judgments that you might feel or actually might be true, or the feelings that you get from others as you're practicing being, really opens up for another whole level of healing and learning. I don't know if it's self-acceptance of when you've learned how to be, but then how do you, you could be living with somebody who's like, why, what's this being thing? And what is being? What does being mean to you? Like what would that involve, just your being?
that is okay. So this is something that's recently come up. I'm in the midst of a transformational coaching course and absolutely loving it. And working with my coach, she shared this beautiful, beautiful story. So if I could just share it with you now.
Please.
Because it speaks to exactly what you're talking about. So bear with me. In 2012, Michael Phelps was swimming his signature race, the 200-meter butterfly. And a South African swimmer by the name of Chad Bull, I think, might be mispronouncing his surname, had beaten Michael in the pre-qualifying race. So he had already shown that he could beat Michael Phelps. And during the actual race, a photographer managed to get this really amazing shot at a certain angle where he captured both swimmers. And you can see Michael Phelps is in his lane doing his thing. And Chad has his head turned. He's watching Michael. Michael went on to win gold in his race, and Chad didn't even platform. He came in fourth. And what we can take away from this is that instead of swimming his own race, he was swimming Michael's race. He was comparing himself to Michael. Comparison invites judgment, and judgment interrupts flow. So what is being? Being is being in your own lane, swimming your own race, and being in flow without worrying about who else is doing what. That's my definition.
Oh, wow. I got goosebumps.
I love that story.
I love that story too. Because how many times does that throw you off when you start comparing yourself? And we've all done it. I mean, we're all, nobody can, I don't think there's anybody who can say they've never been doing something at some point paused and I wonder if I'm doing this right. Why aren't I doing this? Or I can't do this as best as that person. And I've seen it actually quite a bit in this holistic or healing world, whether it's healers or coaches, especially, or even the authors that I've met, is that they've all questioned themselves of who should I be? And I know I had thought about this podcast a year before I launched it. And then I was in a coaching program, and she's a podcaster, and she's like, well, we're going to talk about it later. And I just, bam, I launched it. I was like, if I start overthinking it, I'm going to like get all caught up in it again. And it pauses us. We're not able to really be our best selves. So I'm going to bring that back to when you're in your spot, you're in your lane. And then if other people don't understand, you are actually doing that side glance, of worrying, that judgment of what they're thinking.
So interestingly, so this now comes back actually to the nervous system piece. When we have healthy boundaries, and healthy boundaries, this comes from, I'm going to mess up her name now, Jules Taylor Shore. She's a somatic experiencing practitioner and a licensed counselor and marriage therapist in the state of Texas, I believe. She's got this great workshop. No, it's bigger than a workshop, mini course on boundaries. And she talks about the 4 different kinds: physical boundaries, psychological boundaries, containing boundaries, and executed boundaries. When we have a healthy psychological boundary, which is the distance between you and me, the space between you and me, then what's happening is that I am able to comport myself in a way that serves me and doesn't worry overly or overmuch about what's happening with you. Obviously, if there's behavior that's threatening, then yes, then that could put me in danger. But your feelings are not dangerous to me. And so this is another angle on self-development that does come from initiating safety in the body. And when we feel safe in the body, we can build resilience into our boundaries. And when we have resilience in our boundaries, they are healthy. We are able to go, wow, I'm really sorry that this is not sitting right with you, but this is my path. And, you know, I can only be with you so far before I have to let you figure it out for yourself. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes. And how it all falls into our own feeling safe in our own body. That's really, really, really powerful, having experienced that recently.
Oh, it's beautiful, right? It's beautiful when we feel that. And, you know, the one thing that I would, I guess, also mention is that, of course, there's so much work that we can do by ourselves, but usually trauma, whether it's big T trauma, little t trauma, I don't even like looking at it that way, but usually when there is something that has interrupted our flow, it's usually because we've seen it modeled elsewhere, right? Or it's something that we witnessed that affected us, or however, you know, there's many different paths again. But the point is, it happens in connection. So often when we want to heal, of course, it's good to do work on your own. But most of the time, the finishing touches, that nice little bow, is going to come when you're doing the work in connection to someone else. Mm-hmm. So there needs to be that balance, I guess, is what I'm saying. I think, well, I know for myself, I can do so much work by myself, but ultimately the work is going to be that much more powerful when I do it in connection to someone else.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. Yeah, I believe that there's a balance too. I know that we're responsible for, I believe we're responsible for our own healing. There is a lot of stuff that we can do and learn for ourselves to heal ourselves. And then there are moments in time though, and depending on what you're digging into, is that you can't see all your roadblocks. You just can't.
Yes.
Even energetically, as an energetic healer, as a Reiki master myself, and a sacred soul alignment, advanced practitioner, which is super powerful energy work, as that there are things that I simply cannot see, that the universe will not allow me to see within myself. And yet I could have 10 minutes talking with you and you're like, oh yeah, here it is. Right. And I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what I've been working on. Right. Like, the physical element of what we had talked about, tying into the nervous system and then tying into our whole physical part of that healing, feeling safe, or even, are you even in your body?
Yes. Disassociation is a very common thing, because again, our modern day society demands so much of us. And in a normal regulated nervous system, if that's baseline, you have a stressor come in, and the sympathetic arousal, the sympathetic nervous part of the nervous system comes up. We get peak arousal. But when we're regulated, we go, that deadline's actually next week, or, oh, it's not as bad as I thought, or, whatever it is. And we come back down to baseline. So you get this nice little sine curve, if you will. And that's what it does. It goes up and down and up and down. But because, again, of the stresses of the modern day lives that we lead, and the 24/7 news, and the iPhone that never lets us sleep, what often happens is the stressor comes in and we get stuck at that peak arousal, and the body can't sustain that. So then what happens is you drop. And sometimes you drop below baseline, and now you're in maybe a state of functional freeze, for example. And you're not really feeling your emotions anymore, but you're able to, for some people, you're able to get up and go. And in fact, you can't stop, because stopping means becoming aware of the fact that something's missing inside. So you just go, 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 go. But because modern day society rewards you for go, 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 you're allowed to kind of hold this pattern indefinitely. And really what's happening is that sympathetic arousal is really, it's that energy is still there, but it's trapped in the body. And so inside, the body is got that foot hard on the accelerator, but then another part of your body's got the foot on the brake. And you just imagine doing that to your car. You're gonna wreck your car.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it can't go for very long. That engine revving and the brake, and I've had moments where, and it seems like it's just not, or moments, I have years of my life where the pedal was on the metal, full blast. And then you're so tired, but you can't fall asleep. You can't relax.
Yes, this is it. Yeah, that's another manifestation, right? Because it's like, I can't relax. I don't even know what relaxing is. I desperately want to go to sleep, but my mind is racing. It's really.
Yeah, I remember in my 20s and 30s, I used to sleep with a tablet next to my bed. That was like one of my practices I had for a long time, to be able to get up and just write it out, or the journaling, the intensity of the journaling that I would go through, or just not to forget, oh, you're running out of almond milk. Like, don't forget to pick that up tomorrow. Like, so that I could relax. But luckily those years are behind me.
Yay. Yeah.
Yay. Right. And that learning
Yeah.
how to be. So if somebody is thinking, I wonder, like, what initially started this was, how do we even know if we're in our body? How would somebody know, like, that awareness? Maybe they've been doing some work and they don't, or somebody has told them that. Well, you could tell them that, Jolie. You could say, oh, first let's just connect you to your body. Somebody might go, what in the world does that mean in a practical sense? Like, how would I know if I wasn't connected into my own physical body internally?
I think a really key area is to figure out where your emotions are and how you experience your emotions. I'm aware that I think people can switch this up in different ways, but emotions in some ways, you've got emotions and feelings. And some people say it's the feelings that come up first, and then we label them as emotions. And some people say, well, the emotion actually arises in the body, and then we have feelings around them, that are then translated into thoughts. So as far as I'm concerned, you can argue it either way. But the point is that something comes up, a state will come up in our body. You see a little puppy and your heart melts. You're like, oh, look at this little puppy, isn't it so cute? Or a little kitten, right? I don't know if there was a viral video about a man who stopped to help this little kitten, and as soon as he went to pick up this little kitten, another 12 kittens came running out. Like, he was like, oh my goodness, we've what is going on? Because they all came running out when they saw their sibling being picked up. They were like, oh, safety, and they came running out. Anyway, that's by the by. But the point is that, when we have, whether you want to call it an emotion or a feeling, something comes up and we can really feel it in our body. And then we can identify it. I'm looking at my 15-year-old beagle, who I absolutely adore him, and I'm looking at him, and I'm feeling this beautiful, warm, fuzzy feeling in my chest, and I'm thinking, that's love, right? Or I'm watching the news and I'm seeing things I don't like, and I'm really feeling like the hackles on my neck getting up, and I'm thinking, oh, how can people be so stupid? And I'm getting angry, I'm irritated, I'm frustrated. And so the question is, if you take a pause, how much of that is cognitive and how much of that are you feeling in your body? And most people, I think, would be able to maybe give a percentage even, right? Now, the reason you might not feel something in your body is because your body doesn't feel safe. And that, again, happens to so many people because of that sine curve, that regulation, nervous system regulation isn't there. So, are you going to sneeze?
I was going to sneeze. I'm like, I'll send a pause. Sorry.
No.
Live recordings without editing. No. Yeah, it's past. It's interesting though that it came up when you were talking about that. The percentage of feeling something, and like something was coming up to be released, and then I'm like, where'd it go?
Yeah.
Right? Like No, I think it was the love, right? The love of our dog, because I have my 11, sorry, she's 9. My 9-year-old sleeping here, my sweet little,
Yeah.
my sweet girl. And I love that example of being able to connect in at a percentage of being able to, when you're thinking it versus the feeling it and feeling safe in our body. I
Mm.
I can completely relate to that. As I feel like for a period of time, maybe it's a couple years now, that I wasn't feeling so safe, and more for my own stuff of why wasn't I feeling safe? I had to go in
Mhm.
and figure that out. It wasn't based upon anybody else. It wasn't based upon
Mhm.
my environment, who was in my life. It had to do with there was something inside of me that wasn't feeling safe.
Mm.
And so I had to go through this journey of figuring out, why wasn't I feeling safe? And it has been really a beautiful journey, full of lots of emotions and feelings, and being
Mm.
in my head of challenging it, and then linking it back to my own body and the signs and the physical part of the healing that my body was giving me. And I know today, as I talk with you, Jolie, is that I am definitely feeling safe in my body in the high 90s right now, right? Like, oh my gosh, like I could just like jump up, and connecting in with that ability
Mhm.
is literally changing my physical presence.
Yes. And your environment as well. There's a ripple effect, right? And
Mhm.
that is why this work is so powerful. You might want, for example, couples counseling. Obviously, if you're having an issue and you're able to go to couples counseling together, well, great. But sometimes that's not going to happen. That's not possible. And there's still benefit from one person going and to counseling or whatever modality they choose to go through in order to do some work for themselves. Um, Again, what I've been learning is that when we are in, when we are feeling compassion and gratitude, this is cultivating a sense of safety in our bodies, right? It's kind of overriding, if you will, the amygdala. Now, again, this is depending on the individual. For some people, it's easier to get to that state of compassion and gratitude than it is for others. So this is a bit of a overgeneralization. But the idea is, this is why we practice, gratitude journaling. And this is why people make such a big deal about compassion, because when we do that, we are calming down our brain, right? If you imagine your brain on fire, then the compassion and gratitude is almost like the rain, and it's soothing, and it's trying to put this fire out. And if you are working with a trusted trauma-informed practitioner, then what's happening is you're receiving this beautiful compassion from your practitioner, and that is coming in through your right brain. And then you are also practicing self-compassion towards yourself, and that's coming in through your left brain. And that is where you get this magical, delicious feeling of safety. Parasympathetic, is hopefully coming online. And the parasympathetic part of our nervous system is rest and digest, tend and mend. That is where healing takes place. So
Oh,
yeah, it's important to connect the dots, I think, because
mhm.
then it helps people see where they're going and why they're doing what they're doing.
Rest and, can you repeat that again? Rest and Rest and
this is the
reset.
parasympathetic,
Uh-huh.
is rest and digest.
Okay.
So again, if your parasympathetic system isn't online regularly enough, then what's happening is you're probably not sleeping well and you're not digesting well. Because if you think about it, the sympathetic, we want a little bit of sympathetic arousal in our bodies, but the sympathetic part of our nervous system is really about flight, fight, or freeze. And when our body is trying to get ready to do one of those three things, it is taking the blood away from essential operations such as digestion, right? Mm-hmm. It's taking the prefrontal cortex offline, because this takes too long to figure things out. It's going straight to, the subcortical part of our brain, because that's so much faster. And so, and you think about it, right? It's putting all the blood out into your limbs, so that if you need to run, you are going to run. If you need to fight, you're going to have, all the energy is right there. So the idea of digestion or healing, the cleanup crew, it's all hands on deck. So they're not doing those jobs. They're doing the job of helping you fight or flee. So that's why if you are in a constant state of sympathetic arousal, you're not resting well, you're not digesting well, you're not tending and mending, you're not connecting with people well, and you're not mending on the inside well. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Hopefully.
Yes. And that shows up with not being able to fall asleep or not being able to stay asleep. Yes. That shows up where maybe I went to bed early and then I woke up and because I was so tired, or all of the cultural thing about the obsession with coffee. Mm-hmm. Like, oh, like, mm-hmm. I need a coffee cup this big. And I personally drink coffee, but it's back down. But I've noticed that connection with my rest, with the amounts of caffeine, and then that cycle that starts, right? Like, oh, I need 2 big cups of coffee, and then at night I need to take something to help me sleep because I can't slow myself down. So then in the morning I'm not rested. And then I feel like by the end of the work week, like I'm like, like, okay, I am like exhausted, right? The whole it's mm-hmm. almost Friday thing, and versus being able to really manage our own stuff. And then I think about those times in life when I was in that stage, man, I couldn't eat enough Tums. My digestive system was like, like that stress was showing up there, and it didn't even matter what I ate. It seems like you would just all of a sudden, like a candy bar was giving me, upset stomach, the digestive, or the gas people have, or, like how it kind of shows up, right? Or interesting enough, and rest. I've probably talked about rest a little bit, but on other episodes. But one of the things that I really have noticed is this last 12 months, I had the opportunity for most days to not set an alarm. And I did a study on myself.
Beautiful. Mm-hmm.
Just to really understand. I had many years ago, probably 15 years ago, I had taken a course with Alison Armstrong, who is about understanding men. And in her series of work, she had what was called the Queen Workshop. And I remember flying up, I was in California at the time, flying up to Seattle and spending these 3 days with this amazing course. I think it's renamed something now, and in that course, we had to write down our basic needs, like how many hours of sleep do you need? How many do you get? And it's always stuck with me. So during this last year, I did this like impromptu study on myself. And And I wanted to figure out what is my optimal amount of sleep at this point in my life. What is it that I wake up and I'm me. Yeah, I still might have a small cup of coffee, but I'm all here, right? Like I'm connected in my body. I'm feeling good. What I discovered was shocking. What I discovered was that I need like 9.5 hours of sleep. And I think back on most of my life, it was between probably 6 and 7. And then if you had a weekend to sleep in, to catch up,
Catch up. Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Isn't
yeah,
that a myth?
yeah.
There's no catch up. You know, you might sleep in one day and you got 8 hours or 9 hours of sleep. And then in 2 days, you're still feeling strung out because you need more sleep.
Mhm.
And it was really powerful. So as I've navigated this, recent life change and stepped back into a corporate role in healthcare, I've setting up my routines to be able to say, how can I now support my body, knowing, okay, maybe 9.5 is a bit too much, but how can I support it with 9 hours of sleep?
That's
And does that
beautiful.
mean I need
Yeah.
to go to bed with the chickens? Have I become going to bed with the chickens kind of person? Because I have to allow time for my morning meditation,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
have to allow time for me to have a moment to myself so that I don't get back onto that whole, foot to the middle on the power with my
Mhm.
nervous system so that I can start my morning out just a little bit more easier. So somehow this night person has now changed her routine where I'm able to get up at 5:45, which is unbelievable to anybody who's ever known me. I'm like the person, like, no, no. And I'm able to get up between 5:45 and 6 o'clock and get
Mhm.
up and start my, my morning, the meditation, the stuff I used to kind of make fun of people actually probably a long time ago, but because I thought, oh no, I'm going to get sleep. Now I also can pause it if I need extra sleep. Maybe I went to bed later. I have that wiggle room to go, okay, I'll give myself 60, or 30 more minutes or something, right? Without having to hit that freaking snooze 15 times. I just preset up my morning. But
Mhm.
it's been really powerful being able to set that up. And now my body wakes up at that 5:45, which is astonishing to me that I set my nighttime starts around 8:30. I start winding down 9 o'clock. It's like, okay, go do your, brush your teeth, wash your face routine. And then you are by 9:15, you are doing your evening meditation. And that by 9:30, 9:35, I am falling asleep listening to some energetic healing, but I'm falling asleep and I sleep up until, that one time I do
Beautiful.
wake up, and I do wake up one time in the middle of the night. 99% of the time that's my routine. And so when I wake up, I've been tracking what's my mood when I wake up as well in this. And it's
Mhm.
been really
I love this.
super powerful. Like sounds so simple, right? But
It does, but again, it's sometimes I feel like we're swimming uphill. I mean, I absolutely love that you're doing this, and really, as a night owl myself, I do find that I want to, it's like, oh, everybody's asleep. Oh, I'm on my own. Like, oh, I can kind of, I don't know, have a chocolate, bit of dark chocolate. I can read a book. I can watch a little bit of TV and not have to worry about what everybody else wants to watch, But the thing is that we want to really follow our body's circadian rhythm. And when this is part of this idea of working with the energy, working with the body. I know that, and people laugh, but there's a kind of theory that if you were to go to bed before 10 p.m. consistently, it will help you lose weight. And the reason for that is because the even though human growth hormone secretions really come down as we age, it's still secreted, but it's secreted between 10 p.m. and 12 p.m. And if you want to take advantage of that in terms of helping your metabolism, helping your body, do its thing, you need to be in bed by 9:45. You need to be kind of falling asleep by 10 so that that part of your body can kick in.
I'm speechless.
So
because I'm doing that.
You are doing that, which is awesome.
On this journey too, right? And I'm not going to share how much I've already lost, but because I got more to go. But oh my gosh, I just have to tell my
Debbie,
body that thank
great.
You.
You look great. Yeah.
It's and it's a journey, of understanding that whole reset and digestive, that whole bringing it all the way back to there, all the way back to the nervous system, how it's all so interconnected. These organs are connected to I think you had mentioned to our chakras, and there's so much work out there, right, about our chakras. And when the whole safety thing, being in our root chakra, I think a lot of, hopefully, if not, this might be the first time that they've heard about it. The whole feeling safe in your body is a lot of root chakra and sacral chakra work, and how that translates into our body parts. And I know I've been doing a lot of work with my liver. And the other thing that I've been doing work with is that I had my gallbladder removed in like 26, 27. So we're talking about 30 years ago. I had my gallbladder removed. And so what I've discovered is that, this organ, this extra organ really wasn't extra, that how the gallbladder secretes bile that helps your liver with your digestive. And so I think back of all these digestive issues. I think back of weight struggles through the years after this happened, as time has gone back. And now I'm looking back at it and I'm thinking, no, my gallbladder was essential.
Yeah.
With my liver. Yeah. And now I have, working on my liver, and I'm not a heavy drinker. I mean, don't include my 20s in there, but early 30s. But I mean, I haven't had any, alcoholic type of tendencies at all. But so, normal drinking. And I think about how that all comes through to this whole thing that we started on all four of those systems. How now, after all these years later, that work that was done with the gallbladder and the liver, now they're like, okay, you've been foot to the metal. What's this reset and digestive? We are not going to let you ignore us anymore. All that sickness that comes up, the illness.
And so this is such a great, if you don't mind my interrupting.
No, I'm done.
Such a great point. Well, only because I know we touched on it in our chat before we started recording. And it's this idea that in traditional Chinese medicine, our organs are associated with primary emotions. So the liver system, it's not just the organ of the liver, but everything that the liver is kind of connected to is associated with anger. The kidneys are associated with fear. The heart is associated with joy. The lungs are associated with sadness and grief. The spleen is associated with worry. So we have these organ systems in the traditional Chinese medicine point of view. And traditional Chinese medicine is like, thousands of years old. And they were able to connect the body's energetic principles with the physical principles, right? They married them. And this is where I think, we're starting to rediscover that, because let's face it, Western medicine, allopathic medicine is great when you have an acute problem. If you've lopped off the edge of your finger, Reiki's not going to get that back on. But, going to your doctor, they're going to be able to sew it back. And so when it comes to acute medicine, 100%, but when it comes to chronic problems and chronic illnesses, what we see is that Western medicine isn't complete because it does not address the human spirit. Western medicine reduces a human being to its parts, and that's not enough. This is where the holistic bit comes in. Mm-hmm. We have to look at each individual, and we have to see, if you have two people coming in presenting with diabetes, okay, sure, the symptoms might be the same, but how they got there is going to be different for each person. And if that's the case, you don't want to give them the same medicine because how they got there was different. You've got to treat like that root pathway, if that makes any sense. Mm-hmm. So to bring it back to the liver and this idea of being in our bodies, I think of a practice that I do in my Reiki work, and that is if we're feeling a particular part of our body is maybe a bit of out of sync, or we know, from the blood tests and whatever, that something's not quite right, one thing we can do is talk to that organ, talk to that body part. What is it that you need? What is it that you want me to know? Really honor how that body part has adapted to help you survive. And now you're saying, okay, I'm in a good place now. You can stand down. Let's get everything back on track. Let's get it so that you're not having to overcompensate.
Oh,
yeah.
I'm almost like at a loss for words, because I just did that recently with the help of a beautiful, trusted healer. And she was on an episode actually as the medical medium. And we had a session. And in that session, she walked me through connecting in, and it goes back to that safety with the liver, it all connected in. Mm-hmm. And we did a whole experience over me telling my body I had its back. At its simplest form. That was, I have my body's back, and my body has responded. Like people can just go watch a video from 5 months ago and now, and I look very different. Mm-hmm. And connecting in and feeling safe, like I'm going to stay in my body, and I have my body's back. So when I think about that, when I go to make choices, like, oh, like the sleep, like if I don't sleep, what I have now know about my own body, and having that period of time where I could do that, like I think people could do that if they go on vacation, if they don't overplan and they just have some being time. Mm-hmm. Study their own body rhythms, like even making maybe it's not so simple. I remember in childbearing years for myself that it wasn't so simple. There were so many pulls, and that's why I lived on such a depleted sleep cycle in this no reset and digestive phase. But I also didn't understand the importance of it. I was still in this whole process of learning, of where I've kind of really am starting to really get even firmer on those 4 areas of it all connecting in the whole energetic, physical, oh, help me here.
Mental, emotional. Yeah.
Emotional. And I had spent so much deep dives in, the mental and the emotional, and then the energetic, and then the physical was like, hello, are we the evil stepchild here? Like, and then it gets our attention, right? With this dis-ease. And I think that's why so many practices, however people get there, is that they're all working towards us connecting with that. And our physical body will tell you, like, it gives you signs.
Our body is always talking to us, but are we listening? Right. And the author of Women Who Run with Wolves, so her name is Dr. Clarissa Pinkola Estes. She has a beautiful book called, I believe it's called The Joyous Companion. It might be The Joyous Body. She talks about the body as being the consort. Our bodies are with us 24/7, 365 days a year. Our body was there when we were born, and it will be there when we die. The body is our companion. And yet, you think about a beloved pet or a child, an elderly parent or a grandparent or other relatives, someone you really care about, saying, Debbie, can I have a glass of water? My throat's a bit dry. Would you just go, oh, I'm working on something. I'll come back to you in a minute. No, you would go, oh, let me get you a glass of water, right? But you think about it, that's what we do to our bodies. You're thirsty, but you're like, oh, I'm working. I'll get up and get some water in a minute. I need to go to the bathroom. Let me just write this paragraph. Let me just take one more call. We treat our bodies in a way that we wouldn't treat others.
Right. We're so,
and why is that?
It's so hard. It's, well, I think we have a lot of collective stuff there, like, is it being selfish to take care of yourself when you have self-compassion, when you're learning boundaries, those 4 areas of boundaries, that's pretty powerful. I'd never actually have heard that, because I've done some boundary work with Dr. Cloud, and his book. Whew, man, is that powerful stuff. But I never heard it broken down into how you explained it with that workshop, because there's so many different types of boundaries, and being respectful of it. And one of the boundary things, and you might laugh about this, but I remember if I couldn't make something and somebody wanted me to go do something, I always felt like I had to explain why. Well, when I stopped explaining, I closed that door, like, no, I have something planned. And I learned that from my some of my personal development coaches, Johnny and Laura, were like, you don't have to explain. Like, you're still giving them permission to try to convince you, when you are really trying to hold your own boundaries of, like, you could be home being with your cat, or I don't have a cat, but you could be home with your dog. For me, I'm like, yeah, I'll hang out with my dog. And because I need to be. And they gave us permission to actually clear out on our calendar, like, once a month. I allow, like, if it's Saturday or a Sunday, where I call it my pajama days. Like, I have that pajama day. I mean, maybe I'm not physically in my pajamas. Maybe I throw on yoga shorts, or a, my moo that I wear around the house. But I'm not dressed, like, I am in that relaxed state. I might fiddle around the house. I might read, I might nap, I might, you know, do nothing. But it doesn't involve watching TV usually, though. For myself, that usually doesn't recharge my batteries, unless I'm, in a Hallmark marathon or something. But because I have a tendency to check out of my body if I'm watching TV. I've an awareness I've had. to learn for myself. But just being like marking that literally on the calendar that this is that weekend, like, no, or say something does come up, like somebody wants to go do right now, it's summer here in Flagstaff, and I want to go do the whole cornhole thing. Like, it's so fun. So if I get invited to that, I might switch it, right? Like, okay, now this is the weekend, but I will not go, 4 weekends without having my pajama days.
And that is a beautiful containing boundary where I am prioritizing myself and I am taking care of myself mentally, emotionally, physically, and energetically. And that's huge and something to absolutely celebrate. It's beautiful.
Yeah. And I've had to let go of like you had talked about the whole comparison, with the story that you shared about Michael Phelps, and releasing that of, yeah, this is what I do. And I have friends who've adopted it, and they all are like, yeah, Debbie taught me about, my PJ weekend or my PJ day. Like, yes, there's my mark on the world. Do you have a PJ day? Even if it's every other month, maybe you're in the middle of sports season for your kids or dance or something, some competition, but how can you still incorporate that in, even if it's a half a day? My goodness, just having
exactly.
That.
Yeah.
Got to start somewhere.
Well, and it's interesting too, though. So now I'm gonna draw in a little bit of astrology here. So first of all, with regards to the TV, one of my favorite astrologers talks about how TV, how they talk about chemicals and plastics being estrogen mimics? That there'll be hormone mimics in like plastics and things like that. And so that's why they're not good for us. And so these mimics are, they're not the real thing. They mimic what that hormone is, but it's not a good form of the hormone. And so it wreaks havoc in our bodies. Well, television, according to Caroline Casey, is a Neptune mimic. Now, Neptune, amongst other things, is seen as the planet of dreams, visions, but dreams and music, but dreams. And in her reasoning, she was saying how when you watch too much TV, it's like a Neptune mimic. And what you're actually doing is decreasing your dream time because you're replacing it with this mimic, this Neptunian kind of, or anti-Neptunian, I'm watching TV and it's just being fed to me. It's not growing out of me organically, it's being fed to me. And so, I'm not saying you should never watch TV, but I'm just saying people should maybe monitor how much TV they watch, because it's this mimic that doesn't serve them and steals their dream time. So that's something to think about.
Yes.
And then we were what was the other thing? You mentioned one other thing that I was going to tie into the astrology. That's it. So one thing I've noticed is that when I'm reading when I'm doing a natal chart consultation, people with planets in the 12th house are usually particularly prone to needing those pajama days. They need to spend time alone, because by having planets in the 12th house, that solitude is where they recharge their batteries. And, again, this is where the natal chart is so interesting. I've had clients who have, for example, Mars opposite the sun, and they'll say to me, everyone keeps telling me I should meditate, but I can't. I cannot sit there and physically just be, And it's like, well, you can meditate, but that's not the way for you to meditate. your meditation has to be physical. So for example, you can meditate whilst you run. And you get, but it's all about your intentionality.
Mm-hmm.
Are you setting yourself up to go for a run with the intention of hitting that stride and feeling that flow and being in the moment? That's meditation. And it doesn't have to be sitting with incense cross-legged on the floor. I mean, that works for some people, but it's not going to work for everyone. You can meditate washing the dishes.
Mm-hmm.
You can meditate sweeping the floor. And you can be thinking to yourself, I am sweeping with intention. And I am sweeping out that which no longer needs to be in my space. So
Yes. Yes,
that's
yes,
a taste of
yes. Yes.
how I tie in the astrology.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that. You know, I'm not really strong in the astrology, but when you were talking about the being in the 12th house and, you know, needing the time to yourselves, you know, I've always been a social person. Never have had a, you know, talking. But what I've noticed is I've become more in my body, more aware, more connected in with all four of those areas of my life that started to come forth. And, you know, I recently read a book about what it, you know, invert versus experts. And I always thought I was experted, but I needed inverted time. Now, what I've realized is that there's actually 4 types of inverts as well. And one of them is is a social invert. Like we are social, we're not socially inept. We can go out there and be there, but we do need that time. And being able to really understand that. I mean, that book was so powerful. It's by Jen Jones, by the way, and it's so powerful in understanding, connecting in with being an invert, but a social one, and that why it's okay, why that PGJ is so important, why that's part of my whole going back to your whole reset and digestive, right? So powerful. Yeah, I think I could just keep talking to you forever. Um, and we haven't even dug into like so much of the Chinese medicine. Um, and really with this whole, you know, the metaphysical with our physical and our energetic and our mind and our emotions, like it's just so important. I love that you have been able to find a way to incorporate all of that with the work that you're doing. Most people specialize in one area, you know, just because that's just kind of how I think collectively how it usually comes out, maybe two. And but you've been able to pull it all in with all of these different modalities is so unique. So I would think if somebody is like maybe they're struggling with something and maybe it's coming up more physical for them, that you would be a really good resource for them to be able to tie in all 4 of them, being able to use all of this to be able to help them through, um, what is that? You know, and I think it could be something as simple. Maybe they're not sleeping, right? I mean, that's not something simple, but or they can't calm their mind down, or after 2 years of being in not very social, now they're trying to get out there and they are struggling.
In my Reiki practice, I was really lucky. Prior to the pandemic happening, I was working in an interdisciplinary health clinic and working alongside chiropractors and osteopaths and, you know, sports therapists. Anyway, and so I was offering Reiki, and it was really wonderful because I was able to offer it in tandem with all these other modalities. So it would be part of their kind of protocol, if you will. And then also had patients that only saw myself. And I definitely worked with people who were suffering from insomnia, people who were suffering from anxiety. I had one gentleman who was going through a prolonged period of grief. over a partner passing away. So yeah, it taught me a lot. It really, really deepened my practice and made me appreciate, like you said, about how interconnected everything is, you know, on the inside and the outside.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, it's beautiful. So now, how could somebody reach you if they're wanting to connect with you?
Thank you, Debbie. So I have a website that I keep talking about revamping, but it has all the essential information there, and that is bodhimindful.com. So BODHIMINDFUL, all one word, bodhimindful.com. And I'm on Instagram and Facebook at Bodhi Mindful as well. So those are the easiest ways to reach me. If you could always email me as well at Joli, JOLI, at bodhimindful.com.
Oh, I love that. I can't wait to hear who reaches out and, you know, can really help them make that shift, you know, that they're like, oh, I think that might be my gal, that my person, you know. I think it would be really super powerful to be able to do that, you know. I mean, you can connect your astrology navel chart to something that's even happening or making a decision about different moments. I think it's always so good to have something that we can use as, you know, I don't want to call them sounding boards, but something that you can help make make some decisions if you're getting stuck in transition, and who isn't in transition right now in the world. I mean, the world's in transition itself, the earth. It's moving.
Well, I think one of my favorite quotes from Moshe Feldenkrais is life is movement, right? Or movement is life, I think is actually his quote. And I've always thought about that. You know, life is not a static thing. Life is about being in flux. And, you know, can we navigate that flux as gracefully as possible? And, you know, the astrology part of my practice, that's all about stories and the narratives that we have in our heads, and the stories we tell ourselves. And can we shift? And then I bring in the Reiki to, you know, take those insights, but then ground them into the body, ground them into our physical body and our energetic body. And yeah, I love what I do, and obviously could just keep talking about it all night. So yeah, that's something that I really appreciate.
Yeah, what's so interesting, and you know, I want to thank you for joining me. I know I'm in Flagstaff, Arizona, and you're in the UK. So for those listeners, you know, it's my midday and it's her late evening. And so I want to thank you for making this time change work across the pond, as I like to call. And I just feel so grateful and blessed that you were able to join me, and and really provide so much value to our listeners, you know, the Light Up Your Worth community. And so thank you, Joli.
Thank you for having me. Really loved this conversation.